Marcus, thank you so much for chatting with me today. We're here to talk about your work on Sunfish and other stories on Green Lake, which I'm really excited to talk with you about.
Me too, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Before we jump into the conversation, I want to start with an icebreaker question. And since this movie takes place on a lake, I was curious of what your favorite lake day activities are.
So I would say my favorite lake day activities now are just cruising.
Yeah.
Just on a boat, cruising around, enjoying the weather. But I'll pivot a little bit to my favorite lake memory.
Yeah.
Because that's something that really played into this film a lot. I grew up in Alabama and I went to Lake Martin, so it's like sort of in the center of the state. I grew up in Birmingham; it's a couple hours away. But we would go every summer. We'd go to summer camp, and we were always looking forward to when we could get away and go to a place called Chimney Rock. And it's this big rock on Lake Martin, and there's varying places where you can jump off into the water. And so the question when we were in like middle school and I guess early high school was like, who's got the cojones to go as high as you can to jump off. I think if I remember, there's like three or four different landings, and of course, there's always legends too of like somebody jumped and they didn't come back up and all this stuff. And I'm sure it is dangerous, but that was our thing. No one I knew ever went to the top, and I don't know the heights, but it's pretty stinking tall. But yeah, we would always just like steal away and go to Chimney Rock. That was our big thing and so that's what I remember the most about the lake is like just the butterflies of when are we going to go to Chimney Rock and who's going to go the highest.
I feel like there's a movie here. I feel like
I
there's a
think so, man. I
story.
think well, maybe chapter five in Sunfish or something, tucked
Maybe
around.
chapter five, exactly.
No, for sure.
That's funny. Well, Sunfish is so interesting. It's an anthology film that is a collection of four kind of coming of age stories that all take place kind of interconnectedly on this on Green Lake. So very interesting film, and I'm a big fan of anthologies. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So we are on the other end of Sundance now. So I want to start this conversation with how was Sundance?
Man, Sundance was phenomenal. I think I expected it to be, fun and meet a lot of people, and it just still exceeded my expectations. Just nonstop events. I'd leave the house at like 7:30 in the morning. You get back super late in the evening. Everyone's there to watch good movies, have fun, have a good time. It was just a really great experience.
Um, your history with Sundance, was this the first time that you've gone, or have you been to the festival before?
I've been before, but this is my first time with a film
Mm.
programmed in the festival.
Yeah, no, there's definitely this like really awesome like energy at Sundance. I don't know how else to explain it unless you've actually been there. So
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And I feel like, now that I've been, the first time I went, I wasn't really prepared. I kind of showed up to Main Street and I was like, what am I going to do? And then, you can't really get in anywhere because you need your name on some lists. You need to have at least emailed some people ahead of time and reached out. So this time I was able to, I just let people know I was going to be there, especially the vendors that I worked with on this movie. And then, all the different vendors that I work with consistently. And they're like, yeah, come on by. There's like a chateau or there's a party or, so I think just putting in a little bit of legwork ahead of time just to
mhm.
sort of figure out what you want to do, that really made the difference for me on this experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so I was looking over your filmography and I found it really interesting because a lot of your work has to do with like short form storytelling, either shorts or TV. I know you've done some features, but I found it very interesting that this movie is a collection of short stories in a feature. So I guess I wanted to know, like, when it came to participating in this film, did you feel like this was in your wheelhouse as a bunch of short film projects, or did you feel like this was actually a feature length and it just what happened to be a bunch of short films?
Yeah, yeah, you've noticed that I'm trying to see how many shorts I can make in my whole career. Yeah. I'm still shooting shorts, man. It's, every time I get a short, it's an opportunity to sort of try a new style or, dive into a director's head. So yeah, I do still shoot shorts and I've shot a ton of shorts. I tried to count them not too long ago. It's a lot. But Sunfish we approached as a feature, like as its own film. And although there's chapters, and those are they we didn't treat them as shorts to any degree, with one exception. I will say that we learned really quickly, maybe on the first. probably on the first vignette. The first one we shot was Resident Bird, so it's actually the last one in the movie. Was that the we were shooting a feature in terms of style and the color was going to match and all that, but we were running into short film um, actor availability problems. So like we couldn't punt a scene to the end of day 18 because we shot for 18 days because we were going to lose those actors. It was scheduled
Right.
as though it was four shorts. And that presented its own problem because we were like, okay, well, we have to shoot this in the next 2 or 3 days because we're going to lose this talent, and not just like one actor. We're going to lose the whole crew, or the whole cast for this story. So we did run into a couple of like problems that you run into in short films. You know, you don't have the feature length schedule to sort of punt things and figure out where you might fit a smaller scene or a pickup shot or something like that. But Sierra, early on, we talked about if we wanted to feel consistent all the way across all four films, or if we wanted to adapt the style and even we talked about changing the colors possibly. But it was pretty early on. Within the first couple meetings, we were like, no, no, we want the lake to be the sort of through line, the consistent
Mhm.
character. And for that reason, we wanted to feel like one seamless feature film, as though if you continued watching them, you know, those would also share that style.
Mhm.
So we approached it like a feature. A couple of challenging things we ran into that were sort of short film problems in terms of you have a tiny schedule with the actors, but for the most part, we approached it as one feature film project.
Yeah. Speaking of challenges, I mean, I've never done DP work, so I can only imagine how it goes. But like on dry land, it's probably easier to be able to have the setup and have, lighting and everything like kind of as ideal as possible. But there are a couple stories, at least two stories that have to do with water scenes and things happening on the water. Tell me about your approach on how you captured those either watercraft or water scenes.
Yeah, you definitely clocked what was the hardest challenge we had photographically for the
Mm,
movie. The way that I approached it was we just added more time because we Sierra and I were really prepared going into the whole shoot. I knew mostly all of our frames that we were going to set up for, at least I'd say 80% of them that I could show to my heads of departments and say, the camera's going right here. I want soft light coming from here. Let's get a backlight in there, etc. And I could tell them exactly what I wanted and walk away and they'd come back and they'd know what we were looking at. On the water, the first time we went out, I carried my full camera package just in case. I carried a few flags, I carried some reflectors, I carried all that stuff. And it's like every time the boat went out, I had a little less stuff because I was like, I'm never going to be able to use that. And by the end, for the most part on the water, with a couple of exceptions, we're shooting on a 10-to-1 Ingenue zoom, vintage zoom to match our lenses, because there was just no opportunity to swap lenses and things like that. Like it was just never going to happen. Our boat, especially in Sunfish, she's sailing and our boat's moving at a different speed, and I'm just tracking her as best as I can. And we learned that most of those shots really only lasted a few seconds, anyways, before she left the frame or before it just wasn't an attractive frame anymore for whatever reason. So yeah, that was anytime we're shooting on the water was rough. The times that the camera's in the water, we couldn't afford a proper water housing. So what we had was a splash bag, which for anyone that's used those, like there's no buoyancy control. So anytime the camera goes under the water, it's like me shoving it down under the water, framing as best as we can, and then coming back up for air and looking at my first AC and I'm like, did we get it? So yeah, the water stuff was really challenging, and that was pretty much the only thing for the whole movie that we couldn't really plan for.
mhm.
We definitely went into every single one of those segments with like a shopping list of shots that we wanted to take home with us, and then everything else was just bonus. And I think we got way more than enough, and then it was just in the editor's hands to sort of tell the story. But those were our hardest sequences to be fully planned in advance.
Yeah, well, one thing that I really like about this style of anthology is how you how the story blends from one story into the next one. This isn't like hard stop of one story and then hard start to another story. There's certainly a transition where there's connective tissue between the stories. Tell me about planning for those transitions. I mean, they're very subtle, but also very seamless, and you just go from one story right into the next one. Yeah, how'd you guys go about planning the transitions between stories?
Well, she kept using the word elegant, like she wanted an elegant handoff. And there's a certain poetry to all the stories. So we didn't want to just like cut from a character to another character. We wanted someone to either see that character or, hear about that character somehow so that the story sort of we wanted the camera to feel like it was drifting on the lake. The whole theme that we had was that time on the lake feels like it's timeless. It feels like a memory. It's like there's like a time capsule where when you go to the lake, the whole world moves at a different speed compared to this community on the lake. And so we really wanted the camera to embody that. And I don't think it would have worked to just like cut out of Lou's story and go to Jun or something like that. So when we saw the locations based on the script, it was scripted. The transitions were in the script. So like Lou did sail over to the interloking camp and see Jun, and then the only question was how we were going to shoot that. So we use the binoculars for Lou's story at the very beginning, and then same thing with like at the end, Resident Bird, when the characters don't actually overlap, but it's just the newspaper that kind of alludes to what happened. That was also scripted. The script was something along the lines of the boats fade away, it gets dark, and then we open on the newspaper. And then of course, the shot evolved. It became him tossing the newspaper. The car leads us over to the house. So I think it started with a script, and then it was just getting on the location with Sierra and sort of exploring what our camera could do to keep that poetry that we'd been so intentional about having.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me more about the equipment you used. If I know correctly, you were mainly using Canon equipment here.
Oh no, this was Arri Alexa LF. So we were on
Alexa,
the LF, yeah, yeah, and
yeah,
then
tell me more about that.
okay, so the LF, we early on, Sierra was like, I just want like a lot of close-ups. She's like, I want faces to fill the frame. We also wanted night, right? She wanted to see as much of the lake as possible. And knowing those two goals, like we wanted the widest field of view possible for the lake, and that we wanted faces to feel close and full. That's how I landed on the LF. I just love the way you're able to shoot faces on large format cameras. You can get a little bit longer lens and get the camera a little bit closer, have that wider field of view on the LF. And then we just needed the widest frame we possibly could. Our primary lenses were master built soft flares. I needed something with sort of a vintage feel, but it couldn't be too vintage because I love vintage lenses, but it's not uncommon for a lens to go down or a focal length, like maybe the iris ring stops working or something like that. And we're just nowhere near a camera house. We were like a day's drive from Chicago, from Keslow, Chicago, who serviced our film. So Keslow, our team over here in LA, helped me figure out that the master built soft flares sort of met that need of a robust housing, but also having a vintage look. But we also carried a signature prime 12 millimeter, so 12 millimeter on the LF to just get the widest frame possible. And it's shown there a couple times. There's like a dusk shot of the sunfish sort of sitting in the lake, just drifting at sunset, and that was the 12 millimeter, and it's just super wide, without any distortion. It's really beautiful. But that was our intention. That was the equipment we used, and sort of why we chose the lenses was going for that softer look. They've got sort of this gentle Petzval swirl that I really like, especially wide open. You can see it in the tree leaves. They start to sort of spin a little bit around the center of the image, but they're still really sharp in the middle, and they worked great for what we were going for that like memory sort of effervescent feeling. They were perfect.
No, that's exactly the mood and feel that I got from when I was watching the film. Um, and the tone of the film is so great, and you can feel it through the visual style of it.
I'm so
Um,
glad, man. Thank you, dude. That means a lot.
yeah, no, it's awesome. When it comes to viewing the film, I had watched it as a screener, but I really wish I could have seen it in a theater. Can you speak a little bit to the differences between like viewing your work at home versus in a theater?
Yeah, totally, man. So I'm a big believer in eye scan. The larger the screen, the more that your eye moves across a large screen and sort of takes in an image. That's not to say that watching movies at home is no good. I watch a ton of movies at home, but there's plenty of anytime someone sees a movie that's like a really grand experience, they'll say like you really need to see it in a theater. And what I think they're picking up on is eye scan, is that you're tracking the frame. You can't take in the whole frame all at one time. It's this massive screen. And And I think keeping that in mind too, like keeping in mind what you're shooting for. You mentioned earlier about how many shorts I've done, and I do try to keep in mind where this film will play. So like a feature film, I'm always shooting for theatrical. And I think short films, I want to keep theatrical in mind, but a lot of short films tend to live online, and I think keeping that in mind when you're shooting is really smart, knowing, where your audience will, your long-term audience may be.
Mhm.
Um, and so it does impact how we shoot, I think a little bit. But yeah, man, that's what I think about big screens is eye scan. Like when let's say we open on Nan and Pop, and there's wildlife around, like you're tracking eyes. You start on Nan, you move over to Pop, he pulls up the binoculars. There's like a journey that your eyes take, from beginning to end of a shot, that I think you take in a little bit quicker on a smaller screen. I think it makes for just a more cinematic experience. There's a reason we love the theater.
Yeah, no, there is. And it's those subtleties that, most people can't really articulate. Even I can't articulate it sometimes. I'm just like, you have to watch that in the theater. It just, it has this presence to it. It's just another one of those things I can't explain.
Totally,
But
totally.
that's a really great way of expressing why, that theatrical experience is important, but also kind of how to take in media elsewhere. Um, Let's talk a little bit more about your career before I wrap this up. I noticed in your filmography that we have a little bit of crossover with one project. You had worked on the short film El
Yeah,
Clarito
yeah.
with Zahida Perini. Yeah, it was really so I got to talk with her back when it had premiered, and I think it played at the Seattle Film Festival. And
Hmm.
so it was so cool to be able to talk with her and talk about that project. And then I'm looking at your filmography and you worked on that. So that's super awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I shot El Corito with Zaida right as COVID hit.
Hmm.
I want to say like March 14th we wrapped, March 15th or 16th I was on a plane back from New York City. We actually shot in Corona Plaza, interestingly, and that was right as the world shut down. And I flew back home to LA on like a mostly empty plane. It was a wild experience.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember that was such an interesting era when with the pandemic and everything. So it's really cool that you guys got that project out and that it got so much attention and so much exposure and accolades. So,
It sure did, man. Yeah, it premiered at South by Southwest,
hmm
and it's played at a ton of festivals.
hmm
Yeah, Zaida really toured that thing around. It was great.
Yeah, no, it was super cool. I had done a virtual interview with her at first, but then she came to Seattle and I got to meet up with her and have lunch. So that was a really cool experience in my own history of doing interviews. And so yeah, nice to kind of like talking about interweaving stories. This is
One interesting thing about Acredo is, Sierra and I are in the UCLA film community. So this was her UCLA thesis film. So she's done now. She graduated about a year ago. But I graduated in 2019. But she saw my work, and one of those being El Corrido. El
Mhm.
Corrido was Zaida's second year film, and Zaida came to UCLA. I don't know the exact years, but a few years under me, maybe two or three. And so she had seen my work, and that's sort of how it works in these grad school communities. Is like you shoot something, it takes like a year to 18 months for it to get out and make the rounds. And I actually asked Sierra at Sundance. I was like, "What was the first?" Was There were a couple movies that we had that she had seen. I was like, "What was the first one that sort of pointed you to me?" And she was like, "It was El Corrito." So you saw the film. I think that it eventually led to Sundance,
That's
or
that's
led to Sunfish, and
Sunfish to
then
go.
led to Sundance.
The interconnectedness of this world, it's really awesome.
There you go, man. Yeah.
To wrap up, I want to finish off on this question for aspiring cinematographers. What would be your biggest piece of advice for earning work in the industry?
I always think this is funny because I think I'm still an aspiring cinematographer. But what I always tell people, I think that watching films is really critical. I think the one thing I did that helped me out a lot with my time at UCLA and since is that I was really worried going into a graduate program that I would have seen the least movies, and so I like got on Criterion Collection. I was downloading everyone's top 10 lists. Um, the first movie that I like dove into from the Criterion Collection was The 400 Blows, and I was like 22 years old or something, and I had no idea. I thought the movie made no sense at all. And so I either A, I was smarter than all the people that I admired that had this on their top 10, or more likely I was missing something. And so I just kept watching French New Wave cinema, started watching other film movements, and really expanded my visual vocabulary. And that all came out of fear. Again, like I wasn't given a list of movies to watch. I just was like, I haven't seen enough films. I had seen like sort of the landscape of American bro cinema, Fight Club and
Hmm.
all Christopher Nolan, but a lot of American cinema, but I hadn't seen anything from anywhere else. And I think that served me really well because it introduced me to a whole lot of styles. It expanded my visual vocabulary dramatically, and I was able to sit down with directors from all over the place and just discuss different styles, different movements, without. And I had already seen some of those films. I think when you sit down with someone and they're asking you if you've seen some of their references and you haven't seen any of them, it can be a red flag, right? It's like I want
Hmm.
someone on the same page. Oftentimes when I'm sitting down with someone, it's like, "Oh yeah, I have seen that. Have you seen this?" And we're exchanging ideas. And there's a couple movies that we both want to watch after that meeting, but we're at least sharing a common ground. And the only way you can really do that is by watching films and watching, as many as you can. Watch Criterion Channel, Mubi,
Hmm.
um, all these different platforms we have now that can sort of point us in the direction of new, upcoming, or even classic foreign cinema or something. See, it's stuff that you're not seeing all the time, and I think that's a
Hmm.
good way to expand your vocabulary and make you a better filmmaker all around.
I think that's wonderful advice. I appreciate you sharing that. And again, I appreciate you having this conversation with me, Marcus. Thank you so much. And of course, congratulations on Sunfish and other stories on Green Lake having premiered at Sundance. I'm looking forward to where this film goes from here.
Thanks so much, Thomas. I appreciate you, man.